The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret, the kind that clings to your skin like damp cloth. Jalen Carter, 24, lay in the sterile bed, his legs throbbing under the weight of fresh casts, his dreams fractured but not gone. 3 hours ago, his father's steel-toed boots had crushed more than bone. They'd aimed for his spirit, right before the biggest audition of his life. New York City buzzed outside the window, oblivious to the war Jalen had just survived. He was a dancer, or at least he had been until his father, Marcus, found the flyer for the Prism Collective's annual showcase, a celebration of queer art and identity. "You're not my son if you're one of them," Marcus had spat, his voice ablade, before his boots met Jalen's shins. The words echoed now, louder than the pain. "Now you match your broken life." Jalen's mother, Denise, sat beside him, her hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled tissue. She hadn't spoken since the doctors confirmed the fractures. Both tibias, clean breaks, 6 months to heal, maybe more to dance again. Her silence was worse than her tears. She loved him, Jalen knew, but she'd never stood up to Marcus. Not in their small Harlem apartment where his rules were law. "I'm still going," Jalen whispered, his voice hoarse but defiant. Denise's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to protest, but she stopped herself. He wasn't talking about the audition he'd missed today. He meant the fight, for his truth, for his art, for the life he'd hidden too long. The Prism Collective wasn't just a stage. It was a beacon. Jalen had discovered it last spring, sneaking into their rehearsals in a cramped Brooklyn studio. There, he'd met Mateo Alvarez, a 25-year-old playwright with a laugh like summer and a heart that saw Jalen's shadows before he named them. Mateo's scripts wove stories of queer resilience, and Jalen's choreography brought them to life. They'd spent months crafting a piece for the showcase, a duet that screamed love and defiance through every leap and turn. Now, Jalen's legs were useless, but his resolve burned brighter. By the time the nurse came to check his chart, Jalen was already plotting. The collective's final audition was in 3 weeks, a second chance for those who'd missed the first. He couldn't dance, but he could still create. He'd seen Mateo do it, turn pain into words, into art that cut deeper than any wound. Maybe he could too. Denise finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to do this, Jalen. Not now. Not after." She trailed off, glancing at the casts. "I do," he said, meeting her eyes. "If I stop now, he wins." She nodded, slow and heavy, like she was carrying his pain too. Jalen didn't tell her about the text he'd gotten an hour ago from Mateo. "I'm outside. Tell me you're okay." He hadn't replied yet. He didn't know how to say he was broken but not beaten. Not when Mateo's faith in him felt like the only thing holding him together. The next morning, Mateo slipped into the hospital room, his usual confidence softened by worry. He was shorter than Jalen, with warm brown skin and curls that always seemed to catch the light. His hands carried a small notebook, pages dog-eared from late-night writing. "You scared the hell out of me," Mateo said, sitting on the edge of the bed. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the fear. "I'm still here," Jalen said, forcing a smile. He wanted to reach for Mateo's hand but hesitated, the ghost of his father's voice still lurking. Instead, he pointed to the notebook. "What's that?" Mateo's face lit up, a spark cutting through the gloom. "Our piece. I've been rewriting it. We're not giving up, Jalen. Not on this. Not on us." Jalen's chest tightened, not from pain but from something deeper. Hope, maybe, or the kind of love that doesn't flinch at broken bones. He nodded, and for the first time since his father's boots, He felt like he could breathe. Over the next week, the hospital became their rehearsal space. Mateo read new lines aloud, his voice weaving stories of queer kids who fought and loved and rose. Jalen sketched choreography in his head, mapping movements he couldn't yet make. They laughed, they argued, they dreamed. Denise watched, her silence slowly turning to quiet support, her eyes softer each day. But Marcus wasn't done. Jalen knew it. His father's anger was a storm that didn't fade. It gathered. When Jalen was discharged, crutches digging into his armpits, he returned to the Harlem apartment with a knot in his gut. Marcus was there, sitting in his armchair like a king on a throne, his eyes cold as ever. "You think you're brave?" Marcus said, his voice low and venomous. "You're nothing but a disappointment." Jalen gripped his crutches, his knuckles whitening. "I'm not your mirror, Dad. I'm me." Marcus stood, towering over him, but Jalen didn't flinch. Not this time. He thought of Mateo's notebook, of the stage waiting for them, of the love he'd almost let his father break. He wasn't whole yet, but he was fighting. The Harlem apartment felt like a cage, its walls closing in with every word Marcus didn't say. Jalen navigated the cramped living room on crutches, each step a reminder of his father's rage. But the real weight wasn't in his legs. It was in the silence between him and his mother, who moved around him like a ghost, avoiding his eyes. Mateo came by every evening, his presence a lifeline. They'd sit on Jalen's narrow bed, the city's hum filtering through the cracked window, and work on their piece. Mateo's latest script was raw, a story of a queer kid named Eli who ran from a violent home only to find family in a community of artists. Jalen saw himself in Eli, but he didn't say it. Instead, he suggested movements, slow, deliberate turns for Eli's grief, sharp spins for his rebellion. "We can't perform it like we planned," Jalen said one night, his voice tight. "But maybe I can direct it." Mateo's eyes lit up. "You direct, I write. We'll make it theirs. Someone else can dance your steps." He leaned closer, his hand brushing Jalen's. "We're still a team." Jalen wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed. Could he trust his vision to someone else's body? The Prism Collective's second audition was 2 weeks away, and they needed a dancer who could embody their story. Mateo suggested reaching out to Aisha, a 22-year-old black trans woman they'd met at a collective workshop. She was fierce, her movements liquid fire, and she'd loved their concept. Jalen hesitated. Aisha was talented, but this was his story too. Letting go felt like losing another piece of himself. Still, he agreed. They met Aisha at a Brooklyn cafe, its walls plastered with flyers for queer events. She was all energy, her braids swinging as she talked, her smile wide but knowing. "I'm in," she said after reading Mateo's script. "But Jalen, you gotta guide me. This is your heart in here." Her words hit hard. Jalen nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Let's make it real," he said. Rehearsals started in a borrowed studio, a drafty space with scuffed floors and a single mirror. Jalen sat in a folding chair, crutches propped against the wall, directing Aisha through the choreography he'd dreamed up in the hospital. She moved with a grace that made his chest ache, her body translating his pain into art. Mateo read lines aloud, adjusting the script as they went, his voice a steady anchor. They were building something bigger than themselves, a story of survival, of love that refused to break. But home was still a battlefield. Marcus's anger simmered, erupting in small ways. A slammed door, a pointed glare. One night, he cornered Jalen in the kitchen. "You're throwing your life away for this nonsense," he growled. gesturing at the prism flyer Jalen had left on the counter. You think you're special? You're just confused. Jalen's hands shook, but he held his father's gaze. I'm not confused. I'm gay, Dad, and I'm done hiding it. The air went still. Marcus's face twisted, but before he could speak, Denise stepped between them. Enough, she said, her voice trembling but firm. He's your son, Marcus. Stop hurting him. It was the first time she'd ever stood up to him. Marcus stormed out, leaving a silence that felt like victory and loss all at once. Denise hugged Jalen, her tears soaking his shirt. I'm trying, she whispered. I'm trying to understand. Jalen held her, his own eyes burning. I know, Mom. The next day, Aisha nailed the choreography. She spun through Eli's story with a ferocity that brought tears to Mateo's eyes. Jalen watched, his heart swelling with pride and something else. Hope, maybe, that they could still make it to the prism stage. But that night, a text from an unknown number chilled him. You don't belong there. Quit now. He showed it to Mateo, who frowned. Someone from the collective? He asked. Or someone closer, Jalen said, his mind flashing to Marcus. He didn't want to believe it, but the doubt lingered. They had to keep going, no matter who tried to stop them. The anonymous texts came every night now, each one sharper than the last. You're a disgrace. Stay away from Prism. Jalen's phone buzzed as he sat in the Brooklyn studio, watching Aisha rehearse. He deleted the messages, but they clung to him like damp air. Mateo noticed, his brow furrowing. You okay? He asked, his hand hovering near Jalen's shoulder. Jalen forced a nod. Just focus on the script. But his voice betrayed him, thin and unsteady. He hadn't told Mateo about his suspicions, that Marcus might be behind the texts. The idea felt like a betrayal, but so did his father's silence since Denise's stand in the kitchen. Aisha paused mid-spin, sweat gleaming on her skin. Jalen, you're distracted. Talk to us. Her voice was gentle but firm, her eyes searching his. He sighed, running a hand over his face. Someone's trying to scare me off. I don't know who, but it's working. He showed them the latest text. You'll regret this. Mateo's jaw tightened. We need to tell the collective. They've dealt with harassment before. Aisha nodded, her expression fierce. No one's stopping us, Jalen. This is our stage too. The Prism Collective's director, Lena, a 40-year-old non-binary Asian artist, met them the next day. Her office was a chaos of scripts and posters, a testament to years of fighting for queer voices. We've had threats before, she said, her voice calm but steely. We don't back down, but we need to keep you safe. She arranged for extra security at the audition and promised to trace the number if possible. Jalen felt a flicker of relief, but it didn't erase the fear. He couldn't shake the image of his father's boots, the sound of his own bones cracking. Still, he pushed forward, pouring himself into the piece. Aisha's movements were flawless now, each step a mirror of Jalen's vision. Mateo's script had grown sharper, its words cutting deeper with every draft. They were so close, 5 days until the audition. At home, things were quieter but no less tense. Marcus had stopped speaking to Jalen entirely, his presence a shadow that darkened every room. Denise tried to bridge the gap, cooking Jalen's favorite meals, asking about the showcase. I want to come, she said one evening, her voice tentative. If that's okay. Jalen's throat tightened. I'd like that, Mom. He didn't say how much it meant, but he hoped she saw it in his eyes. The night before the audition, Jalen and Mateo sat in the park near the studio, the same one where they'd first admitted their feelings months ago. The air was crisp, autumn leaves crunching under Mateo's boots. "We're gonna kill it tomorrow," Mateo said, his voice warm with certainty. He reached for Jalen's hand, and this time Jalen didn't pull away. "I'm scared," Jalen admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just about the audition. About everything." Mateo squeezed his hand. "I know, but you're not alone. You've got me, Aisha, your mom. We're your family now." Jalen's eyes stung, but he smiled. For the first time, he believed he could face whatever came next. The texts, the pain, his father's hatred, they couldn't take this from him. The audition day dawned bright and cold. The Prism Collective's theater was alive with color. Rainbow banners, queer artists laughing, music pulsing. Aisha warmed up on stage, her confidence electric. Jalen sat in the front row, crutches at his side, directing her final run-through. Mateo stood beside him, script in hand, his presence steadying. But as the audition began, Jalen's phone buzzed again. "You shouldn't be here." His heart sank. He scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Marcus's face. Instead, he saw Denise, slipping into a seat near the back, her expression nervous but proud. Aisha took the stage and the world fell away. Her movements told Eli's story: grief, rebellion, love, with a power that left the audience breathless. Jalen's choreography, Mateo's words, their shared heart. It was all there, alive and undeniable. When Aisha finished, the room erupted in applause. Lena approached them after, her eyes shining. "You're in," she said. "This is what Prism is about." Jalen's chest swelled, but the victory felt fragile. As they left the theater, another text came. "This isn't over." The Prism Collective's showcase was a week away, and Jalen's world felt like a tightrope. The anonymous texts hadn't stopped, each one a splinter in his resolve. "You're a mistake. Leave the stage to real artists." He'd stopped showing them to Mateo, not wanting to dim the fire in his eyes. But the fear was a constant shadow, heavier now that their piece was set to debut. Rehearsals were intense, the Brooklyn studio a crucible for their art. Aisha had taken Jalen's choreography to new heights, her movements weaving Eli's story with a rawness that made audiences lean forward. Mateo's script had evolved too, its final draft a love letter to queer survival. Jalen directed from his chair, his voice steady despite the pain in his legs and the dread in his gut. Denise came to every rehearsal, sitting quietly in the corner, her presence a fragile bridge between Jalen's past and his future. One evening, as they packed up, Lena pulled Jalen aside. "We traced the number," she said, her face grim. "It's a burner phone, no name attached. But the texts are coming from Harlem, near your place." Jalen's stomach dropped. "You think it's my dad?" Lena hesitated. "We don't know, but we're increasing security for the show. You focus on the art. We'll handle the rest." He nodded, but the weight of her words followed him home. Marcus had been distant, his silence louder than his anger. Jalen couldn't shake the image of his father's boots, the cruelty in his voice. "Now you match your broken life." Was he capable of this too? Stalking his own son, trying to break him again? That night, Jalen couldn't sleep. He sat on his bed, staring at the Prism flyer taped to his wall. Mateo's handwriting was scrawled across it. "We're unstoppable." Jalen wanted to believe it, but the texts felt like a countdown to something worse. The next day, he confronted Marcus. The apartment was quiet, Denise at work, the air thick with tension. Marcus sat in his armchair, a beer in hand, his eyes fixed on the TV. You sending those texts? Jalen asked, his voice low but steady. Marcus's gaze flicked to him, cold and unreadable. What are you accusing me of now? Someone's threatening me, telling me to quit Prism. You know anything about that? Marcus stood, towering over Jalen's crutches. You think I care enough to waste my time? You're not worth it. The words cut, but they didn't answer the question. Jalen held his ground, searching his father's face for truth, but found only anger. The showcase loomed closer, and the team pushed harder. Aisha added a new flourish to the choreography, a slow, defiant lift that made Jalen's heart race. Mateo rewrote a monologue, giving Eli a moment of quiet triumph. Jalen felt their work coming alive, but the texts kept coming, each one more vicious. You'll pay for this. 2 days before the show, Denise found Jalen in his room, staring at his phone. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice soft. Not if it's hurting you. Jalen shook his head. It's not about the pain, Mom. It's about who I am. I can't let him or anyone take that from me. She sat beside him, her hand resting on his. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I should have said it sooner. Her words carried him through the final rehearsals. The night of the showcase, the theater was packed, a sea of faces under rainbow lights. Jalen sat in the front row, Mateo at his side, their hands clasped under the armrest. Denise was there too, her eyes bright with tears she didn't hide. Aisha took the stage and the world held its breath. Her performance was electric, every step a rebellion, every turn a promise. Mateo's words rang out, sharp and true, weaving Eli's story into the hearts of everyone watching. Jalen felt the weight of his own pain lift, replaced by something fierce and free. As the final note faded, the crowd roared. Jalen's eyes burned, but he was smiling. They'd done it. They'd taken his brokenness and made it art. But as they stood to take their bows, Jalen's phone buzzed. You're done. The theater's applause lingered in Jalen's ears, a tidal wave of sound that drowned out the fear for a moment. Aisha's performance had been a triumph, Mateo's words a blade of truth, and Jalen's direction a testament to their shared resilience. But the final text, "You're done," sat like a stone in his chest as he navigated the crowded lobby on crutches, Mateo and Denise at his side. Backstage, the Prism Collective buzzed with celebration. Aisha hugged Jalen so tightly he nearly lost his balance, her laughter bright. "We did it," she said, her eyes shining. "You did this, Jalen." He smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. Lena approached, her expression serious. "We've got security watching the exits," she said. "No one's getting near you tonight." Jalen nodded, grateful but uneasy. The texts had escalated, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the threat was closer than they realized. Denise stayed close, her hand brushing his arm. "I've never seen anything like that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You made something beautiful, Jalen. Something true." Her words anchored him, but the fear didn't fade. As they left the theater, the night air sharp against their skin, Jalen scanned the crowd. Faces blurred together, strangers, supporters, maybe someone else. Mateo's hand found his, a quiet promise. "We're okay," he whispered. "We're together." The next morning, Jalen woke to a voicemail from Lena. "We got him," she said, her voice tight with relief. "The guy sending the texts. It's not your dad, Jalen. It's some kid from a rival crew, jealous of your spot in the showcase. He's been banned, and we're pressing charges." Jalen sat on his bed, the weight lifting but not gone. It wasn't Marcus. The realization brought relief and guilt in equal measure. He'd been so quick to assume the worst of his father, but wasn't that what Marcus had taught him, to expect cruelty? He found Marcus in the living room, staring at the same armchair he always claimed. "It wasn't you," Jalen said, his voice steady. "The texts. I thought it was you." Marcus didn't look at him. "Doesn't change anything," he muttered. "You're still choosing this life." Jalen's chest ached, but he stood taller. "I'm choosing me, Dad, and I'm not sorry for it." Marcus said nothing, his silence a wall Jalen couldn't climb. But as he turned to leave, Denise stepped forward. "I'm going with him," she said, her voice firm. "To the next show, to wherever he goes. He's our son, Marcus, and he's enough." The words hung in the air, a line drawn. Marcus didn't respond, but Jalen saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of love he'd buried long ago. Months later, Jalen's casts were gone, his legs healing but not yet ready to dance. He and Mateo moved into a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, a space filled with notebooks and dreams. Aisha joined them often, her laughter a constant in their new life. The Prism Collective offered Jalen a role as a resident choreographer, a chance to keep creating, to keep fighting. One evening, as they sat in their park, the same wooden bench under the same autumn leaves, Mateo pulled out his notebook. "I wrote something new," he said, his voice soft. "It's about us." Jalen read the first line, his heart swelling. "Love is the courage to stand when the world wants you to fall." He looked at Mateo, at the man who'd seen him through the darkest days, and leaned in, their foreheads touching. The city hummed around them, but in that moment, it was just them. Two hearts, unbroken, unstoppable. Denise came to their next show, her pride brighter than the stage lights. Marcus didn't, but Jalen didn't need him to. He had a family now, one built on love, not blood. And as he watched Aisha dance his steps, Mateo's words echoing through the theater, Jalen knew he'd won. Not just the stage, but the right to be himself, whole and free.